Hello, I'm Bill Kurtis. In the 1950s, few politicians took television seriously. Many saw it as an annoyance. Only a handful saw its potential. But during the presidential campaign of 1960, television established itself as a crucial instrument in American politics. Television's explosion in the late 1950s led to sweeping changes in the American political process. This was the signature in the sky of a revolution Americans called television. In 1950, only 4 million homes had television, but by 1960, it reached into 44 million homes. It was September 26, 1960. Congress had made possible direct TV debates by presidential candidates for the first time. WBBM-TV in Chicago was chosen as the scene for the first great debate.
I just want to see if the position of the lectern is right. Will you take camera 2, please, Roger?
In the studio, producer Don Hewitt prepared for the arrival of Nixon and Kennedy. Representatives of the candidates inspected and approved each detail of preparation, down to the shade of gray in the painting of the set. Vice President Nixon was the first to arrive. He has campaigned right through the morning and paused only in the afternoon for solitary rest, without staff or entourage, at the Pick Congress Hotel. Now he listens while the rules of TV debate are explained.
This is agreeable. I think we just both just stand here, right?
Right.
Good.
Excellent. Oh, and incidentally, I think what Howard will actually say is the first question now to Senator Kennedy. You may not want to get up till he's finished. Then once you've got enough to comment on it, then you're up for the rest of the... And Howard will hit the gavel if somebody ignores it.
What does the cut? The cut means that's it.
Get out, Grace.
5 seconds. Right? No, what I mean is you want to quit quickly, or how?
Yes.
How
well,
much?
we figure when you see 30 seconds,
Then try to bring it. All right.
And then the cut is, that's it. And then Howard will give you a few seconds over the cut, and then bang,
I
bang.
understand. Sure. Well, we'll cut it.
Come on. Stay right there, Mr. Evans. Pull the face back entirely. Looking right at the camera here. Do that again. Take care again, Candy. Look this way, please. Take care.
So you had a big crowd in Cleveland, I know.
Vice President.
With the wind. The wind, not the sun. The wind just blazes.
We have to shake your handshake, please. We didn't look at it.
All right. I'm one more.
Thank you. Okay.
Now, are you leaving tonight? No, I leave at the first thing in the morning.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Kennedy, would you mind looking around here a second? That's it. Well, thanks very much.
Maybe you get back there.
Hey, come on.
All right.
Senator, please stand on back. Can we clear the shot now? Will everybody just move back, please? Okay, fellas, can we strike this right away, please? And put the other lectern in? Will somebody please take that? Now, David, will you hit the 1-minute switch, please?
You hear me now, speaking? Is that about the right tone of voice? It is a pleasure to be here tonight and to participate in this program, which opens up a series of discussions, sometimes known as great debates.
Both fall silent now as airtime approaches, composing themselves, as the largest audience in political history prepares to measure two men for leadership. All across the nation, parents quiet their children. It's September 26th. It's 8:30 as millions bend forward to see the next president. But first...
So much easier to do, pure magic for you. Spiral brush, colors, curls, waterproofs, really separates lashes. New magic mascara.
Because of the following special broadcast, the programs originally scheduled will not be seen tonight. Next week at this time, The Andy Griffith Show and Hennessy will be seen on most of these stations.
Good evening. The television and radio stations of the United States and their affiliated stations are proud to provide facilities for a discussion of issues in the current political campaign by the two major candidates for the presidency. The candidates need no introduction. The Republican candidate, Vice President Richard M. Nixon, and the Democratic candidate, Senator John F. Kennedy. According to rules set by the candidates themselves, each man shall make an opening statement of approximately 8 minutes duration and a closing statement of approximately 3 minutes duration. In between, the candidates will answer or comment upon answers to questions put by a panel of correspondents.
The audience for the first debate is almost too huge to measure. This is the first of 4 TV encounters. Researchers will claim each debate caught the attention of almost 70 million Americans.
And now for the first opening statement by Senator John F. Kennedy.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Nixon, in the election of 1860, Abraham Lincoln said the question was whether this nation could exist half slave or half free. In the election of 1960, and with the world around us, the question is whether the world will exist half slave or half free, whether it will move in the direction of freedom, in the direction of the road that we are taking, or whether it will move in the direction of slavery. I think it will depend in great measure upon what we do here in the United States, on the kind of society that we build, on the kind of strength that we maintain.
The subject of the Chicago debate was domestic affairs. Kennedy spent a relaxing day at the Ambassador East Hotel with his brain trusters, preparing as if for a college exam. Kennedy directs himself not so much to Nixon as to the unseen audiences of the nation.
In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt said in his inaugural that this generation of Americans has a rendezvous with destiny. I think our generation of Americans has the same rendezvous. The question now is, can freedom be maintained under the most severe attack it has ever known? I think it can be. And I think in the final analysis, it depends upon what we do here. I think it's time America started moving again.
And now the opening statement by Vice President Richard M. Nixon.
Nixon, however, in debater's style, addresses himself chiefly to Kennedy.
The things that Senator Kennedy has said, many of us can agree with. There is no question but that we cannot discuss our internal affairs in the United States without recognizing that they have a tremendous bearing on our international position. There is no question but that this nation cannot stand still because we are in a deadly competition, a competition not only with the men in the Kremlin, but the men in Peking. We're ahead in this competition, as Senator Kennedy, I think, has implied. But when you're in a race, the only way to stay ahead is to move ahead. And I subscribe completely to the spirit that Senator Kennedy has expressed tonight, the spirit that the United States should move ahead. Where then do we disagree? I think we disagree on the implication of his remarks tonight and on the statements that he has made on many occasions during his campaign to the effect that the United States has been standing still.
The Nixon campaign stressed the vice president's superior maturity and experience, but face to face, the two men seemed evenly matched. With this debate, the Nixon claim is shaken. Moreover, ill at ease, under strain, dressed in a suit of gray that blends into the background, Nixon in this first debate leaves a disappointing image in the minds of millions of Americans. For years, men and women will argue who won or lost the Chicago debate. But political analysts will agree that the debates were the most important single episode of the campaign.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. That completes the opening statements, and now the candidates will answer questions or comment upon one another's answers to questions put by correspondents of the networks. The correspondents.
I'm Sander Van Oker, NBC News.
I'm Charles Warren, Mutual News.
I'm Stuart Novins, CBS News.
Bob Fleming, ABC News.
The first question to Senator Kennedy from Mr. Fleming.
Senator, the Vice President in his campaign has said that you are naive and at times immature. He has raised the question of leadership. On this issue, why do you think people should vote for you rather than the Vice President?
Well, the Vice President and I came to the Congress together. 1946, we both served in the Labor Committee. I've been there now for 14 years, the same period of time that he has. So that our experience in government is comparable. Secondly, I think the question is, what are the programs that we advocate? What is the party record that we lead? I come out of the Democratic Party, which in this century has produced Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman, and which supported and sustained these programs which I've discussed tonight. Mr. Nixon comes out of the Republican Party. He was nominated by it. And it is a fact that through most of these last 25 years, the Republican leadership has opposed federal aid for education, medical care for the aged,
development of the Tennessee Valley, development of our natural resources. I think Mr. Nixon is an effective leader of his party. I hope he would grant me the same. The question before us is, which point of view and which party do we want to lead the United States?
Mr. Van Oker's question for Vice President Nixon.
Mr. Vice President, in one of your earlier statements, you said, we've moved ahead, we've built more schools, we've built more hospitals. Now, sir, isn't it true that the building of more schools is a local matter for financing? Were you claiming that the Eisenhower administration was responsible for the building of these schools, or is it the local school districts that provide for them?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, your question brings out a point that I'm very glad to make. Too often, in appraising whether we are moving ahead or not, we think only of what the federal government is doing. Now, that isn't the test of whether America moves. The test of whether America moves is whether the federal government, plus the state government, plus the local government, plus the biggest segment of all, individual enterprise, moves. We have, for example, a gross national product of approximately $500 billion. Roughly $100 billion to $125 billion of that is the result of government activity. $400 billion, approximately, is a result of what individuals do. Now, the reason the Eisenhower administration has moved, the reason that we've had the funds, for example, locally, to build the schools and the hospitals and the highways, to make the progress that we have, is because this administration has encouraged individual enterprise. And it has resulted in the greatest expansion of the private sector of the economy that has ever been witnessed in an 8-year period. And that is growth. That is the growth that we are looking for. It is the growth that this administration has supported and that its policies have stimulated.
Senator Kennedy?
Well, I must say, I think the reason that the schools have been constructed is because the local school districts were willing to increase the property taxes to a tremendously high figure, and in my opinion, almost to the point of diminishing returns in order to sustain these schools. Secondly, I think we have a rich country, and I think we have a powerful country. I think what we have to do, however, is have the president and the leadership set before our country exactly what we must do in the next decade if we're going to maintain our security in education, in economic growth, in development of natural resources. The Soviet Union is making great gains. It isn't enough to compare what might have been done 8 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 20 years ago. I want to compare what we're doing with what our adversaries are doing, so that by the year 1970, the United States is ahead in education, in health, in building, in homes, in economic strength. I think that's the big assignment, the big task, the big function of the federal government.
I've been asked by the candidates to thank the American networks and the affiliated stations for providing time and facilities for this joint appearance. Other debates in this series will be announced later and will be on different subjects. This is Howard K. Smith. Good night from Chicago.
Overnight, television had given John Kennedy star quality, and the Kennedy bandwagon began to pick up steam. Six weeks after his first debate with Richard Nixon here in Studio One, John Kennedy was elected President of the United States. And although there were 3 additional TV encounters, none had the impact or the audience of the first debate. The Nixon and Kennedy images created here would be hard to erase. No longer would a candidate be judged solely by his words and promises. In the Nixon-Kennedy contest, television had become the great equalizer, elevating a United States senator to the level of an 8-year vice president. Following his election, John Kennedy offered this assessment of the campaign. It was TV more than anything else, he said, that turned the tide. Since 1960, television has turned the tide in many campaigns. It has become a powerful political instrument. And it came of age in the very studio where you all have gathered this evening.